Welcome back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're going to positively be celebrating 31 years of this here program and many nights at the barn and all over the community. We're going to be doing that at Costas on Thursday from 2 until 5. It is a Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery. I got some fresh holiday cash drop tickets to give away that Roz dropped off last week at Fadley's. Would encourage everyone to make sure you're enjoying our piece with Dan Rodricks this week. My pal David Etlin, longtime editor at the Sun, stopped by. We talked about world travel, had some crab cakes, had some fried oysters. We'll be doing that again at Costas on Thursday with Gina Schock from the Go-Go's, as well as one of my best pals, John Allen from Stone Horses and Charm City Devils and Child's Play, telling some old rock and roll stories with our old Hammerjacks friends as well. 2 until 5, going to be a great hootenanny celebrating 31 years and celebrating the holidays at Costas. I celebrated the holidays with Mr. Rooney's cookies. Only thing that makes Mr. Rooney's cookies taste better, Luke Jones, is if when you're eating them with Charlie Batch and Rod Woodson in the Steelers press box. Big thanks to Mike Tomlin for being a professional and being a man of integrity and allowing me to do my job on Sunday, along with Luke up in Pittsburgh. So if you saw me in Pittsburgh in the press box, the Ravens had nothing to do with it. The Ravens did not want me there. No one from the Ravens even spoke to me other than Harbaugh coming to the podium and saying, welcome. And I'm thinking, yeah, Mike Tomlin sent me. So that was my story on Sunday. Certainly the Ravens story was a 16-14 victory. Luke is here to join us now in short week this week. Some questions about not just whether the second string quarterback can play in Tyler Huntley. And it always offends me when the coach is like, Tyler counted backwards in months. Yeah, can you do that? And I'm thinking to myself, dude, he just got hit in the head. He had a brain injury. Are you like, what do you like? That's always gross to me when people are stepping out on brain injuries at this point, because I can see what brain injuries do to the. It made Tony Saragusa tell me he loved me one time in Denver. But the quarterback situation for the Ravens right now, a little bit in flux, but somehow you and I are feeling better about the 9-4 Ravens than maybe we even were on Friday.
Yeah, that's what's funny about it. In one of our previous segments talking about the health of this football team, it sounds almost silly to be saying that when your best player is sidelined and probably going to miss this week's game in Cleveland with Lamar Jackson with his left knee, and you lose Tyler Huntley. And I hear what you're saying about the concussion thing. I will say, I think some people just want to know how a guy's doing in terms of, that he wasn't sent to the hospital or that something like very serious. It's not to say that it's not serious, but you want to hear a little update, and it's good to hear that he sounds like he's doing okay, but we'll see how the testing goes.
I still hear these terms like ding and stingers, and
we don't hear that nearly as much as we used to. I mean, go watch some old games on NFL Network, and you'll see guys come back in a game when they've been diagnosed with,
and they're stumbling as they walk out.
Yeah. So I mean, it has changed a lot, but I hear what you're saying on that. But yeah, I mean, you look at this football team as a whole. They're getting healthier overall, other than Lamar, which is a huge one. I get that. But you get Stanley back, you get Dobbins back, Marcus Williams back on the back end of the defense, and we already saw that pay some dividends. All three of those guys paid dividends in their returns. But now you look at a short week situation, a Cleveland team that, let's face it, since Deshaun Watson's return, hasn't exactly been lighting up the scoreboard. They won a game in Houston last week on the shoulders of their defense and their special teams making plays, and they were held to 10 points in Cincinnati on Sunday. And hey, we've been talking about it. That's a really good Bengals team. I think a team that a lot of people feel at this point in time, talking mid-December, is better than the Ravens. Now they're tied in the standings, and that's all that matters right now. And the Ravens have a tiebreaker, but we know what Cincinnati's been. But you kind of look around the league, and I think that's a great reminder of how dramatically some things can change. I mean, let's go back. I know it was a few days ago at this point. How about what Baker Mayfield did for the Rams on Thursday night? I mean, that was, whether you like Baker Mayfield or not, and I get it, Cleveland and first overall pick, and failed in Carolina. We saw him, just look terrible for the Panthers a few weeks ago here in Baltimore. But to get off the plane on Tuesday night and to then play on Thursday night, play quarterback, I've never seen anything like that. I know Calais Campbell was talking about it in the locker room late last week, that he's just kind of wowed by that, to see that. So you see that, You see the Detroit Lions, who quietly are 6-7 and in the playoff race, and really handle the Vikings on Sunday. You kind of just look around, and
Teams come to
every
life
time
at
you think you have things
various points, right? I mean, even
right.
the Lions have come to life for the first time ever, right?
Yeah, well, it feels like the first time ever, first time in a long time at the very least. But yeah, I mean, you never really know. And some teams, I mean, look at the Giants, for example. The Giants are one of the great stories of the first half of the season. Since then, we've kind of seen them, and we talked about it at the time. We were really wondering, okay, Brian Dable, Wink Martindale, great. Those guys are playing hard, but you kind of looked at that roster and said, are they really talented enough? And I think that's kind of, that's playing out since then, as they're now 7-5-1 after seeing what they were when they beat the Ravens back in mid-October. So, you see teams trend up, teams trend down, but it's never you can never say it isn't interesting. Right? I mean, every single week you come away with something that just makes you scratch your head. How about the Cowboys, who won, but I mean, they needed a pretty impressive comeback to beat Houston even. I mean, just who figures on something like that? So you just never really know. That's why even these games that we've talked about with the Ravens here of late, where not so much Sunday, but against Denver, against Carolina a few weeks ago, where you look at it and you say, wow, that wasn't impressive. But it is when you get the win, because there are teams that struggle, and unexpected things that happen every single week. And if you can survive and just get another W, and you improve that column in the standings, that's all that matters. So that you're reminded of that every single week when you see some of these results that just make you scratch your head. I mean, the Tennessee Titans, 3 weeks ago, we were talking about them in terms of, are they going to be jockeying not so much the number one seed, but could they be the 2 or 3 seed, let's say? Now it's a case of, are they going to hold on in the AFC South, because they've looked pretty dreadful for the last 3 weeks. So you never really know, and that's why the NFL remains king in terms of a must-see TV on a weekly basis.
He's Luke Jones, covering all things National Football League. And where are you with Lamar in playing this week, especially if the issues with Tyler Huntley and the head and what, like, I that's an interesting conundrum for John. If it gets into the weekend, would you feel comfortable playing 4 quarters with Anthony Brown based on what you saw on Sunday, or would you be more inclined to figure Lamar out? How important is the Cleveland game? How important is the Atlanta game? I don't want to say they're all important.
Mm-hmm.
I think Lamar playing in January is the most important thing they have going, right? Like that, as well as everybody else we've seen healthy. Stanley, Andrews, Kyle Hamilton, all these guys that have been coming back and getting them back onto the field in some state, J.K. Dobbins, of Gus Edwards, making sure these guys are 100%. Lamar and the prognosis on him over the next week or 2 or 3, and when they need him and when they want him, I think they were okay playing with Tyler Huntley for a couple of weeks. I think they certainly would feel better about that than Anthony Brown right now.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, but I still think you can't rush Lamar back. I wrote that early last week at BaltimorePositive.com. Here's the reality. Even if you're talking in terms of having angst with Cincinnati and how well they're playing, even knowing the Bengals have some tough games on their schedule between now and when they welcome the Ravens to town in Week 18, the Ravens are in a good spot. Having secured Sunday's win to improve to 9-4, even if we're talking in terms of wild card. I mean, the Chargers are 7-6. The Jets are, and they're the number 7 team right now, as we're concluding Week 14. But the Jets 7-6, New England going, they're 500 as they were going into Monday Night Football. I mean, it's, it really is they've got some cushion at this point in time. I mean, that's just the truth in terms of the wild card. Now, division, I get that. And you want to win the division, you want to have a home game. I totally understand that. But you can't deviate from the plan. And to be clear, that's not me saying that the Ravens are automatically ruling Lamar out for Saturday. I think that the expectation, and we saw some of the reporting over the weekend, is he's most likely going to be out once again. And I think that was the thought when the reports of a PCL sprain, those were some of the indications. So, but no, you don't rush him back. You cannot potentially sacrifice his health for the rest of the year and beyond because you're worried about a Week 15 trip to Cleveland. It's just it's important, but it's not that important. This is not you lose and your season's suddenly on the brink. No, they're not in that position because they won on Sunday.
And
I mean,
they're winning without him, right? I mean, that's the point. Yeah.
that's the advantage, right? So if it comes down to it, that the early optimism on Huntley is unfounded, and he wakes up and he's still not feeling great with the concussion over the course of the week, and he doesn't pass protocol in time for Saturday, then you play Anthony Brown and you try to run the ball 50 times. Maybe you come up with a trick play or two. Maybe you have James Prochet try to throw another pass. Who knows what happens? I say that in jest, but you can't sacrifice anything about Lamar Jackson's health just because you want to win on Cleveland. And I get it, it's a division game. They're still tied with the Bengals. Cincinnati looks really good. So I understand all that, but no, you cannot sacrifice, because this isn't, as I wrote at BaltimorePositive.com and as other people have expressed, going back to last year, even talking about the ankle before we knew ultimately it was going to be something that Lamar wasn't able to return from, especially when they didn't make the playoffs. But understanding what makes him truly special, and that's not to take anything away from his ability to pass, but his ability to elude virtually anyone on the football field on any given play is his greatest strength, right? It is his greatest athletic gift. When you're talking about a knee injury, especially a PCL, which isn't as serious as an ACL, but it still has to do with the stability of a knee, you have to be careful there. You need to err on the side of caution here. You need to, if anything, keep him out an extra week rather than bring him back a week early.
It's a $250 million knee there, literally.
Well, it's that, yes. In the big picture, no question about it. But it's also, if you want to truly do anything in January, and look, I say that with no disrespect to Tyler Huntley or Anthony Brown or any other Ravens player who's come back from injury, as we've talked about the improving overall health of this football team. None of that matters if Lamar Jackson isn't right physically. It doesn't. I'm sorry. Maybe there would be some miracle scenario where Tyler Huntley could win a wild card game if you've got a favorable matchup, but you're not doing anything truly meaningful in January without Lamar Jackson being right physically. So with that in mind, no, you don't deviate from whatever your plan was going into Sunday's game in terms of what you're thinking about for Saturday in Cleveland, before the Pittsburgh game. Nothing changes just because Tyler Huntley has a concussion, and now we're wondering about his health. So you just have to hope he responds well to going through concussion protocol. And first and foremost, you just want him to be healthy, period, because again, it's a brain injury. To your point, I don't want to be insensitive to that, but as it pertains to football, you hope he's got a chance to be ready for Saturday. If not, then it's Anthony Brown, and Brett Hundley would be the backup quarterback then, who has played in the league. In fact, we saw the Ravens pick him off a few times in Green Bay 5 years ago, which feels like a really long time ago at this point in time. But the Ravens re-signed him. He was with them in the spring and summer, but they re-signed him to the practice squad this past week. So if Tyler Huntley can't go, if Lamar Jackson is not ready, as all indications seem to suggest, then yeah, it'll be Anthony Brown, and you roll the ball out, try to run the ball, play defense, and confuse Deshaun Watson, who hasn't exactly looked great in his first action in nearly 2 years. And, you let the chips fall where they may, but you're certainly not going to do anything to compromise Lamar Jackson's health just because you want to win on Saturday against Cleveland.
Luke Jones is here. He is monitoring all things little Orioles offseason as well, and some signings last week. And Aaron Judge stays with the Yankees and winter meetings and all that, as well as the Terps playing some basketball this week out on our Twitter at WNST. I've been permanently suspended for Twitter. I don't even know what I did wrong. So I don't know if permanent really means permanent or not, but we're figuring it out. But at WNST, it's all there. We have a big week ahead here, certainly as the holidays get going and early football. This flex thing this weekend, we haven't talked much about that, and I know it's the money in the league and television and all. This is less than desirable, I think, and I guess that gives them normal rest for the Atlanta game next week. But they are getting into this period of time where bodies are banged up. That was a physical game in Pittsburgh. It always is on Sunday. Short rest is a little troublesome for me. I mean, especially with where they are and trying to get. I mean, J.K. Dobbins got caught from behind. He's not right. Ronnie Stanley was out there and said, I'm playing and whatever. It's not like riding a bike. He said it's a lot harder than that. Muscle memory of that. Because I asked him about that. And so they're not where they need to be. And getting a little bit of rest would help for some of these guys, I guess. And I think you'll see that with practice. And, John likes his practices, and you need that when you have the third string or the second string quarterback starting this week. But I do think there's a point here where getting these guys to post on Sunday and having them look ready to play. And they looked ready to play on Sunday in Pittsburgh. They did. I mean, they 10-0 lead out of the gate. That's what I want to see against these weakling teams, Cleveland, Atlanta, Pittsburgh. These are 3 games where they should be winning these football games the next couple of weeks. And if they do that, to your point, they lose in Cincinnati, they go on the road, they'd be a wild card, but they would be a much more effective wild card than stumbling here without Lamar in the next week or 2 or 3.
Yeah, and I mean, really, the Cleveland game, I mean, it's not a layup because you're on the road. We know AFC North. We know what that fan base, how they view a Ravens game in Cleveland. It's their Super Bowl. It'll be Deshaun Watson's first home game, right? I mean, I'm not celebrating that, to be clear, but for that fan base, there's clearly some, whether it's excitement or disdain, I think it probably depends on whoever you ask. There's certainly going to be some juice for that. Let's say that at the very least. But what you mentioned as far as health, I mean, that's every team at this point. I mean, it's mid-December. You're not going to find a team, even the teams that are, quote, 100%, they're not 100%. I mean, there's a lot going on over the course of the week. I mean, just take a look at this past week's injury report on Wednesday, the number of guys that, Marcus Peters is barely practicing at this point because they're just trying to give him rest and trying to give him the time to get that. It's not that he suffered a new injury. It's a reality for a lot of these guys. Calais Campbell gets rest days. Jason Pierre-Paul gets rest days. Ronnie Stanley will continue to get rest days. So you try to balance that because, to your point, you are looking at a potential situation where a guy is going to be making his first NFL start who was on the practice squad and is still on the practice squad, mind you. So you want to have those guys out there to get some reps, or as many of those guys as you need out there to get effective functional reps for your young quarterback, whether it's Brown or even Tyler Huntley, who still isn't, doesn't have a world of experience. He has a handful of starts under his belt. We act like he's some established vet at this point, relatively speaking, but you're just trying to get these guys right. I mean, Kevin Zeitler was a great example of this, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone as far as the local beat. I think everyone kind of assumed with him, he missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday, that, okay, he was back out there on Friday, ran around a little bit, looked okay in the little bit of practice we were able to watch, and you just assumed he was fine. Well, he wasn't. And we saw that in the pregame workout on Sunday. So you hope that him not playing however many snaps it was on Sunday does some wonders for him, and I'm sure he'll get a little more rest this week. And we'll see how he looks come Saturday. But you're trying to balance getting the work that you need to get over the course of the week with getting these guys ready to play that game. And as you mentioned, with being a Saturday, it is tough. And I found it interesting because they've done some of this late season flex. And I'm not talking the flex schedule where you're just talking about going from 1:00 Sunday to the Sunday night football game. We've seen that for years and years. That's nothing new. But this is a little different when you're talking about flexing from not knowing if you're going to play Saturday or Sunday. And I feel that they've done that for a few years now. And if you recall, the Ravens played that Saturday game against the Chargers out in LA in Lamar's rookie year.
I went to that game.
That was a game that fit that description, but I felt like that game was set a few more weeks in advance, that they knew they were going to play Saturday night. Whereas this game, it was last week when we found out, so it wasn't a great deal of notice. Now, all these teams that knew that they were candidates to play Saturday, they made arrangements and they had contingency plans and all that. So it's not as though there's a great hardship from a logistical standpoint, but just speaking from a functionality standpoint, it's tough. Short week games, it's a challenge, whether you're talking about Sunday to Saturday, whether you're talking about playing a Monday night, coming back for a Sunday 1:00 game. I mean, you have that, but comes with the territory. Cleveland will be dealing with the same thing, and we'll see how the Ravens fare. As we said, going into that Pittsburgh Cleveland road game, this 2-game stretch here specifically before they come home to host Atlanta, I think anyone was saying they can get one of these two, they're okay, they're fine. If they can get one of these two, they're fine. Well, they've already gotten one, so now it's a case of, can you go from fine to still being in really good shape by beating the Browns on Saturday, which, again, not going to be easy, not a layup, but certainly not a game that you're looking at and saying, oh, they can't win that by any means. Because let's face it, and as many of us were kind of pondering before Watson even came back, Jacoby Brissett wasn't the problem for the Browns. He actually, go look at his numbers. He was having a pretty nice season. Their offense has kind of gone the wrong way since Watson's come back. And how much of that is rust? I'm sure that's a huge part of it, but it'll be interesting to see how he does against a Ravens defense that, say what you want, they bend. They did a lot of bending on Sunday, but they make those takeaway, those turnover, game-changing kind of plays. See if they can get Deshaun Watson to throw them a couple over the course of Saturday's game.
He's Luke Jones. He's monitoring all things sports, all things Ravens this week on the short week, heading to Cleveland, then, of course, Atlanta for Christmas Eve. You can follow him out at Baltimore. Luke, you can follow us down to Costas, celebrating 31 years. Me being on the radio, that's 31st anniversary is actually the 13th, which is Tuesday this week. We're going to be celebrating on the 15th on Thursday afternoon from 2 until 5 at Costas. We're going to be giving away Maryland scratch-offs. I have new scratch-off tickets here. Roz brought these by last week, the holiday cash drops. I also have some Raven scratch-offs as well. A few of these left over. Come by and see us on Thursday at Costas. All brought to you by our friends at Window Nation as well as Goodwill Industries. 'Tis the season for eggnog and fun. I am Nestor. We are WNST. We never stop talking. Baltimore, positive.